Hello, listeners. Been wondering how you can help the show? Probably not. But here are 5 things you can do. 1. Subscribe. Support the show by clicking the subscription link in the show notes. 2. Review on iTunes, on our website, www.afraidofnothingpodcast.com, or on whatever app you listen to. 3. Donate. When you go to our website, click the cute coffee cup icon. Or in the show notes, click the subscription link. 4. Share. Sharing really is caring. Tell your friends and even your enemies to check out the show. 5. Watch. Wait a minute, it's a podcast, not a movie. Actually, it's both. Check the show notes to find out where to watch the documentary. You can also rent it on Prime Video. That's it. Oh, one last thing. Enjoy this episode.
2 of life's greatest mysteries are, do we go on after we die? And the other one is, are we alone in the universe? The second one is about to be answered, but no one's paying attention. Tonight, we talk about alien disclosure.
In a world where nothing is known, nothing is certain, reality is not real. Wake up! Be afraid of nothing. I'm Bob Heskey. Robert.
The host with the ghost.
This is my podcast, based on my paranormal documentary, Afraid of Nothing. Each episode, we talk to people who see life and the afterlife through a different lens. Join me.
Who is this large man? And what's he doing in our bedroom?
As we lift the veil and open our minds to see beyond our eyes lie. This is Afraid of Nothing.
Tonight's guest is a true Renaissance person of sorts. She's an author, public speaker, historian, ghost investigator, research scientist, and a UFO expert. Earning a BS in chemistry and a master's in English literature made it obvious early on that Linda Zimmerman had wide-ranging interests. After working as a research scientist through the 1980s, Linda decided to pursue her real passion, writing. Today, Linda is the author of over 30 books, is a popular speaker, has made numerous appearances on television and radio, and has starred in an award-winning documentary based on her book, In the Night Sky. Linda has lectured at the Smithsonian, West Point, and Gettysburg, as well as at national conventions, universities, and Mensa events. Astronomy and the space program are also favorite topics for her books, articles, and lectures. In addition, Linda has appeared at major science fiction conventions and Comic-Cons for her zombie and science fiction novels and comic books, especially after becoming a comic book character in the Ghost Investigator comic books, based on her popular series of books. Linda Zimmerman, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. I've been doing some research on you, and you are a woman that wears many hats. You're an author, you're a public speaker, you're a historian, a research scientist, a ghost investigator, and a UFO expert. How do you find time to do all that stuff?
I don't know, but I enjoy it all, so it's not work to me.
Now, the science side of you, because part of you is a paranormal investigator and a UFO expert, how did the science part of your brain work with the side that kind of went over to the paranormal side?
Well, I started out as a scientist. I never thought I was going to be a paranormal investigator, but I was just drawn to the mystery of it. And there is no reason you can't go about it scientifically. It's a great discipline to have, knowing the scientific method, conducting experiments, and you apply that to the paranormal. And when you can rule out any normal explanation, you know you've done your job and you feel pretty confident when you do find something paranormal.
Yeah, and we're going to go into, you've had some UFO sightings early in your life when you were in high school and in college, so it impacted you before you even started your science career, so we'll talk about that. But how have you changed from when you were like 20 versus now? How is your mindset about the reality that we live in? What has your perception changed much?
I've gotten older, but really, no. I mean, as a kid, I was just in awe of all things strange, and I still haven't lost that fascination. That's what keeps me going with everything. The thrill of the hunt, the search for the mysterious. So, whereas a kid, it's in books and, movies, and you try to believe it and you hope it's true. So now I'm even more confident in it since I've experienced and worked on these topics.
So you've done a lot. You've written over 30 books. You've had an award-winning documentary based on one of your books and all the different careers that we talked about. You're about to retire, but the timing is weird because it seems that you're busier than ever. You've recently been filmed for a bunch of episodes for shows that you probably can't tell us yet what they are. You were on the Unsolved Mysteries podcast. That's one of my favorite podcasts to listen to. And due to a COVID relief bill, the Pentagon is about to release a disclosure report basically acknowledging that UFOs are real. They're showing up almost daily, and we don't know what to do about it. So this time, the timing is odd, but what is your thought about with all this stuff that's going on with disclosure, and why now? Why now do you think that this is happening?
Oh, I would love to know why now, because certainly the government's been withholding this information from us since World War II. But maybe something big has happened behind the scenes and they're trying to gently break it to us. I don't know why the timing, and I'm still optimistic, but cautiously so that what they're going to tell us is not a smokescreen for something else. I'm not a huge conspiracy theorist in this regard, but I will believe it when I see it and it is verified.
You know what's weird too is I talk to a lot of people and they don't even know about the disclosure stuff that's been going on for the past 3 years. I have older brother who's a scientist, or he was a scientist. He's kind of retired now. He's like, what? I didn't really know about it. And even one of my other brothers who loves the paranormal, he wasn't really familiar about it. It's so weird with this big groundbreaking thing that's just a story that's been unfolding really for 3+ years that people aren't really paying attention and really giving it much notice.
Yeah, and one of the things that people have said, well, they won't tell us the truth because everyone will panic. No, they won't. I mean, look at the information that's come out already. They probably glance at it on their cell phone and move on with the rest of their day. I don't know that there's going to be mass panic. Just come out with it already. Tell us what you know. If you don't know what it is, then maybe we need to start getting concerned, because if you don't know, maybe there is a threat. That's one of the things that's kind of worrying me. We keep hearing threat assessment, threat. Are they a threat? Is this a ploy to get more military funding, or do we know that it is a threat?
Yeah, I mean, I just think people just don't have much, government doesn't have much credibility, over the past couple of years. You wrote a book, and we're going to talk about that. You wrote a couple books, actually, about activity in the Hudson Valley a couple decades ago, and that has like a 75+ year history of stuff going on, which we're going to go into. But really about a little bit over 3 years ago in 2017, one of the key levers that started getting this into the public eye or dripping it was an article in the New York Times. And it revealed that the U.S. Department of Defense had spent about $22.5 million on a secret program titled, I think it's the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, ATIP.
Mm-hmm.
That was set up to investigate UFOs. And it originally was set up in 2007, 10 years before it was announced. And it was set up at the request of Harry Reid, who was a senator from Nevada, which is home of Area 51. And he's a big paranormal guy, apparently. And he was the Senate Majority Leader at the time. And the other name kind of connected to this is a guy named Luis Elizondo, who left in 2017 and started having conversations with the authors who wrote the New York Times article. And now a lot of stuff has been dripped out lately about Tic Tac videos, Navy videos, and things like that, where they're sharing videos and you're hearing kind of incredulous pilots saying like, whoa, look at that. We can't keep up. Almost admiration of some of the stuff that they're seeing in the sky. So that's kind of the setup. What is your thought about kind of how this has been dripped out? And as a person who knows this kind of intimately, what's your reaction to it? What do you think when you start seeing it like this and start building a case of credibility?
Well, I think we all knew that the government was researching this for many years, as much as they denied it. And however this came out, whether it was leaked or intentional, it's very refreshing to have it come out. That New York Times article having a legitimate UFO subject being covered in the New York Times was just a huge shift in the entire field. I think in retrospect, years from now, we'll be able to divide the field of ufology before that article and after that article, because now the momentum's building. You see on the different networks people treating this legitimately. 60 Minutes having something. Even President Obama making a comment, well, we don't know what they are. He didn't say, I don't know anything about it. He didn't say, oh, it's a ridiculous topic. He as much as admitted, yeah, it's something, we just don't know what it is. So these things are huge. And Luis Elizondo, to my mind, he's doing the right things for the right reasons and trying to get all this out and trying to get people to pay attention to what's happening around us. So again, I will use the caution optimism, because we've all been fooled before with many things. So I don't want to be too gullible, but wow, if you told me even 5 years ago all of this would have happened, I'd say, yeah, in what fantasy world are you living?
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, Leslie Keene is like an investigative reporter, and she, for over 10 years, I think she's been working on this. It seems that her approach was to focus on the most credible witnesses she could find. And like, for example, she wrote a book about generals, pilots, and government officials who went on the record about UFOs. And that was about, I don't know, it was like 10 years ago. And then she was one of the authors of that article. So it almost seems like there's a whistleblower aspect to this where it was almost undeniable, you know, and it's almost like for Luis Elizondo, it's almost like a perfect storm for him a little bit where people are starting to pay attention to it. For you, this has to be kind of, you know, it's a little bit redemptive, but also you've been working on this and you've known this from a while. You wrote some great books on, one was Hudson Valley UFOs and the other was In the Night Sky, where for the past 75 years in a place where you call home, the Hudson Valley, there's been stuff going on. And there was in particularly a period in the 1980s, from 1982 to 89, where it really ramped up. So you want to talk about kind of when you were growing up, what it was like with UFOs and why 1980 might have been such a high activity point of time for it?
Yeah, so I thought that UFOs were normal growing up because they were always in the news or people seeing them. And then when the 1980s came around, you know, there was a bunch in the late 60s, 70s. And then when it came to the 1980s, it was almost every night of the week. And 3,000 people, 5,000 people witnessing these massive triangles or V-shaped objects. I just got an incredible account from somebody who said he saw one the size of several football fields, absolutely silent. One woman I interviewed, she said it was so enormous, it took up the entire sky. She said the entire sky was metal and lights. I mean, that's impressive when you can't even see the ends of this thing. Silent, sometimes hovering over a highway or an area for as long as 20 minutes. So it's not like people were seeing some distant lights darting through the sky. I had several people say these objects were like the size of a baseball or football stadium, just enormous and silent and close, brushing the tops of the trees. These were life-altering experiences, and it went on for about 6 years.
I have to ask you, is it something as big as that? Did it just creep up? Someone looked up and said, whoa. Did it just appear instantly, or did they see it coming from the horizon from a distance? Or how did these things appear? Were they just there and they just noticed them because they were so silent? Or did they feel a shadow or feel the energy different?
Yeah, sometimes, like you said, feel a shadow. Sometimes people are just chatting in their backyard or something, or walking the dog, and they realize, wait a minute, I don't see any stars, and we'll look up and see this massive craft. But often they would be driving or doing something outside at night and see some strange lights and watch as this object would very slowly creep their way. Many people described saying they could walk underneath it and it was moving at a walking speed, or would come to a halt and then slowly drift off. And no one ever saw them take off from anywhere. No one ever saw them land anywhere. So it was just unlike any other wave in history.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hi there. Do you love stories that start out ordinary, but with the turn of a universe become unforgettable, life-changing moments? So do I. I'm Ruru Sig, and I'm inviting you to the Story Chaser podcast. Join the adventure, and I promise that you will laugh, cry, and feel inspired when you listen to my narrative essays. Click the link in the notes and listen to the Story Chaser podcast, where great stories are told well.
So if someone's walking underneath it and looked up, was there heat? Was it hot? Was it cold? Did it, in the interviews you had, was the atmosphere changed much from it? Or
That's a good point. No, nobody ever described heat coming from these objects. Sometimes they would feel like a vibration, almost like when somebody drives a car with their subwoofer banging, and you feel it in your stomach. Sometimes they would feel that. For the most part, there wasn't any wind certainly involved, no temperature changes. Most people just said a complete feeling of awe, just being totally overwhelmed.
Now, you mentioned this was in the news, like especially during the 80s. Was it just local news, or did things like Prime Time or whatever, the journalistic shows at that time, 60 Minutes, did any of them ever pick this up, or was it more like localized news that this was?
Some of the talk shows did pick it up. The New York talk shows that were broadcast across the country, and the newspaper accounts themselves did occasionally go around the country. So the information was certainly there at the time for people who were interested, who wanted to pay attention to it, but it just didn't get the attention it should have, because there were a couple of groups of pilots who were trying to hoax being a UFO, and this was the perfect disinformation campaign. So when people would call it in, or they'd call the local news to report it, a lot of times they'd be told, oh, it's that formation of planes. We don't bother with it.
They were called the Martians, right? It was just like a group. It was almost kind of like a little mini gang of hoaxing pilots. And they would, I don't know what type of planes you would describe, that they would go up in the air and they would be in a formation with lights and try to mimic that and try to get people to believe it's UFOs. But
yes.
I think the difference there is it's probably very loud, right? They're planes that they had, and you'd certainly be different than looking up and seeing something the size of 3 football fields that thousands of people saw with these lights that's silent and no heat is coming down or no loud noise. Was that what you kind of found out?
Right. One group had small single-engine Cessna planes. They would fly in formation with that. There was another group flying ultralights, which were very popular during the 80s. They basically look like go-kart frames with weed whacker engines. They're very unstable, unsafe, illegal to fly after dark, which they were breaking the law, no doubt about it, and deafeningly loud. I always say, a formation of ultralights sounds like a flock of lawnmowers going overhead.
Yeah.
So I've interviewed hundreds of people who said, we saw the massive silent craft at treetop level, and then we saw those idiots in the ultralights or the Cessnas trying to fake. And that was universally those idiots, or even worse terms, because at flying high altitude in formation, people would actually get upset and drive off the road. If you're driving along at 65 miles an hour and you see this formation and you're trying to look, you're going to get into an accident. So it was really unsafe. It was so stupid. They should have all been arrested. And I know the names of a few of the pilots, but to this day, nobody will go on record. But this was the go-to excuse for every law enforcement place in the area. Anytime someone called, no matter what it was that they told them they saw, something the size of a football field over my house at 50 feet, they'd say, it's a formation of planes, and hang up.
Yeah, yeah. Most of these sightings you mentioned are that they saw a craft. Were there any tales of like alien abduction or people seeing who's flying the planes, or was it mostly just flying the planes, flying the objects, or was it mostly just seeing the craft itself but not seeing who was behind the wheel or anyone being taken up inside?
So many abductions. I could not believe it. I thought,
really? So that I got to tell you, because
oh my God,
that's what I thought it would grab more attention. So that's interesting. So I would love to hear about that.
Sure. Yeah, I started calling the Hudson Valley Abduction Alley because so many reports of missing time, abductions, you name the classic signs, seeing grays, being taken aboard craft, or just losing 5-6 hours, scoop marks on bodies, nosebleeds, all of the classic symptoms of having a very, very intense close encounter. And this really goes back, I found out, to at least the 1920s here.
Wow.
And nobody was really talking grays and abductions back in the 20s. And this was continuing for decades and really picked up to an incredible rate in the 1980s.
So when you interviewed people, did they talk about, yeah, my father, my grandfather experienced it too? Was there any of that going on? Or?
Absolutely. That was one of the first things I recognized, multi-generational abductions. The first person I interviewed for the In the Night Sky book and film, he was having experiences back in the 50s as a kid. Turns out his parents both had experiences going back to when they were kids in the 1930s. His children subsequently had experiences, and now the great-grandchildren are as well. It's like one big experiment.
Wow. Is the Hudson Valley kind of a place where people don't leave? They like it and they grow and generations grow up there? What's it like there?
Yeah, they really do. It's kind of a sweet spot. Often within an hour or thereabouts, you can be in Midtown Manhattan and all that has to offer if you want. Or you never have to see a city. Where I live, there's 2 dairy farms down the road and orchards and woods, and you have that wonderful suburban best of both worlds. You can sit in the woods all day if you want, or you can hop in your car and go have dinner in Manhattan in an hour. So it really is an excellent place to live in terms of convenience.
Yeah, not to get graphic, but you just mentioned the dairy farms. Were there ever any cattle mutilations going on there, or was nothing like that happen in where you grew up?
You know, there's one we're trying to track down now. It's not a common thing at all. Until recently, I had never heard of any reports, but apparently there was one herd of cattle that were all mutilated one night, and they blamed it on a pack of these little wild dogs. Now, I'm sorry, 7 small dogs are not going to take down dozens of cattle. That's just ridiculous. They're going. So I'm trying to find out more information about that. But to my knowledge, nobody has really reported that.
We're going to go into your personal experiences. You had 2 of them, actually, with UFO sightings. But what do you think? What is it about the Hudson Valley? Because it really is, in terms of sightings, it's like what? The number 3, 2, it's very up there in terms of where the concentration of sightings are. It's one of the most prevalent in the country. What do you think it is? Is it an energy vortex? Is there an underground base somewhere? Is there a military establishment somewhere? What do you think it is that draws all this activity?
Well, for years, people said, oh, it's the military base and our nuclear power plant. But I've been tracing sightings now back over 100 years. There was a huge wave in 1909. We had no military bases. We weren't even flying at night yet. You know, aviation was so young. Certainly no nuclear power plants. So I suspect there's something about this area, whether it's the natural energy fields here. We have a fault line. We have some unusual magnetic fields. There are some gravitational anomalies. Lots of water, of course. I would have to surmise that whatever is here is something they can utilize for their purposes. Can they surf the magnetic fields here? Is there something they can draw upon? I don't know, but I think it probably predates even the colonists being here, because certainly across the country, Native Americans have stories about star people.
Can you give us geographically just kind of the swath of what the Hudson Valley is? You leave New York and Manhattan, you go, what, like maybe an hour, and then you're in the Hudson Valley. Can you just give us the geographic range of what it is?
Sure. The Hudson River runs from up near Albany, kind of near the middle of the state, about 2 hours north of Manhattan, and goes right down and empties right in New York City there. So really, as soon as you get out of the city and start heading north, that's the Hudson Valley. And it really is a stunningly beautiful area, mountains and highlands and palisade cliffs and things. And so the bulk of the 1980s was, I'd say, within an hour of Manhattan itself. And then, of course, the valley itself continues up to the Albany area. So it's probably about 120-mile long stretch, roughly, of the course of the Hudson Valley, with communities living on both sides, with a lot of lakes, a lot of reservoirs, tributaries running into the river, lots of mountains. So it's not flat, featureless terrain by any means.
Except for Albany, it's not like, is it densely populated or is it very rural through that area?
Most of the towns are pretty small. There are some larger communities, Poughkeepsie, Peekskill, Kingston, some small little cities. Once you come out of Manhattan, nothing really looks like a city till you get to Boston or Philadelphia.
Yeah.
But they're more urban-like communities, but certainly the bulk of it is suburbs to rural. Like I said, I can be dining in Manhattan in an hour, but I'm surrounded by woods here, and it's very tranquil.
Wow. nothing changes someone's perception and perspective until they've had an experience themselves. And you've had 2 UFO sightings. One was when you were in high school, and I think the one that probably affected you the most was when you were in college. Could you kind of walk us through both of those?
Sure. Yeah. It was actually college, and then a few years after that.
Oh, okay.
The college one was December of 79, and I get a call from a friend a few towns away. Linda, run outside. Something just passed over us, headed your way. I was living in a small town called Nanuet at the time. So me, my boyfriend, his friend, and sister, we go running outside, and there are these 3 roundish, whitish, yellowish lights in like a little V formations, absolutely silent, just gliding by. And so my immediate reaction, jump in the car and follow them. And long story short, I apparently have some missing time of about an hour or 2 during that night. And ultimately, we saw these 3 lights had separated. And sometime later, we see them come back. And we thought they were going to collide. They're like, oh my God, they're coming right for one another. And they come together in this bluish flash. And then as one object, they lower to the top of this hill, and there's this greenish blue pulsating light. And, I'm going to college as a science major at this point, and that does not go to any form of science I know, how 3 objects...
That's your thesis right there, Linda.
It should have been. I don't know if I would have graduated with that. The new physics of unidentified objects. So, yes, that was unbelievably... How do you ever forget seeing something like that just defies the laws of physics, really? And then in the 80s, I did see this massive, massive V-shaped craft silently gliding across the landscape. It was a big open field and over some woods. Tried to follow it, but the roads did not go where it was going. And there was no sound, as I said, and it's just so eerie to see something of that enormous size. Your brain is used to seeing airplanes and hearing the airplane sound. And when that part is missing, it's a very exhilarating and unnerving experience.
Now, I have to ask you, your first experience where you lost like an hour and a half of time, did you and your boyfriend or others, did it freak you guys out? Did you feel that you might have been abducted? Did you ever have another experience where you lost time? Or did you just say, can't remember?
Well, this is how it happened. I immediately wrote down everything that happened that night, I thought. And then it wasn't until a few years ago when I dug out my writing and put it all together. And so, wait a minute. What happened during that hour and a half? And so I called my ex-boyfriend and said, you remember that night? He's like, oh yeah. And he said, I remember going to the lake, and then I can't remember what happened after that. I said, oh my God, that's me too. I remember following.
Did your stomach drop? Did you get a pit in your stomach?
God,
did you feel
it? I was horrified, because here I've been researching and interviewing hundreds and hundreds of people about their experiences, and thinking, well, it's a good thing I've never had any missing time. That would be terrible. And then when I realized it, and the more I looked into it and confirmed, yes, something's missing here, I felt like I was looking at a huge painting with a hole cut out in the middle. And it's not a comfortable, pleasant feeling. I don't want to say I feel violated, because I don't know what happened then, but it is a sense of intrusion in your personal space.
Did you ever have, like you've seen in some of these movies, did you ever have, maybe I should talk to a hypnotist or someone that can bring me back to that time?
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever think about doing that? Or
I did
You
do
did?
that,
Okay.
and it was remarkable. I don't really talk about what came out because I'm not sure if it was my mind creating it. It didn't seem like it at the time. It was an extremely deeply emotional experience to go through, tears and waves of feelings, and I'm glad I did it, and I think there's probably something to what came out of it, but it's certainly nothing I feel comfortable saying this is the truth.
Yeah.
Because it was not a conscious memory.
I don't want to get too personal, but I was just curious. Did you ever share, like, did you do a recording? Did you ever share it with your ex-boyfriend and said, hey, I went back and did this? Or did you just kind of keep it to yourself?
Yeah, I did talk to him about it and asked if he wanted to try it, and I believe the response was hell no.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't want to know, but I wanted to know, and I still want to know more. I may try it again someday because it's an enormous, important part of my life that I can't remember.
Yeah, that's incredible. We were talking before we got on the interview. One of the things that you're actually working on as well for research is the effect on animals. I've interviewed a pet psychic, and they're very much, with ghosts. What freaks animals out about ghosts is scent. There's no scent, and it freaks them out because there's no scent, and they go absolutely nuts.
Okay.
You mentioned that you were doing some research on how these sightings affect animals, and I was curious. What's the difference between animals versus humans, and how far in your research have you gotten so far?
Well, they are detecting and sensing machines. Their capabilities are so far beyond ours. Usually, the animals react long before people see or hear anything, and react once a craft moves off. They're usually still very agitated, afraid. I think the prime reasons for this are sound. Obviously, many animals have much higher frequency ranges of hearing.
Yeah.
But I also think a huge player in this is electromagnetic fields. They're finding every day there's another study about how animals, they literally see the magnetic field. That's how birds navigate. They see these bending lines in the air of the magnetic field. So it's like road maps. And not to get too crude, but dogs, they always, when they can, when they're not on a leash, they will point north before they go to the bathroom because that's the angle they feel comfortable in. It's just remarkable how sensitive, super sensitive they are to even slight changes. So my thought is there are catalogs of EM effects from UFOs, car stalling, static, power failures, things like that. So if these craft are somehow utilizing or producing these intense electromagnetic fields, and it's approaching these animals, their entire sense of well-being, their orientation, I describe it as, is it like us going on a roller coaster or spinning around and upside down? This is probably extremely agitating to them.
It's got to be horrible for cows with cattle mutilation. If they're so sensitive and they see beyond the normal spectrum that we have, what they see coming. It would be so interesting if at some point there could be a computer simulation of what animals see or what they pick up. That would be amazing.
Right. Yeah, and somebody had a very interesting comment, and this was years ago, knowing how many animals get mutilated and just disappear in sightings. It's a frightening number. And they said, are they so afraid because they know nothing good is going to come from these craft? Have they learned over the generations? Is it like a collective consciousness thing that these things are here to harm us?
Yeah,
it's a possibility.
What's interesting, that is, when I again bring it back the pet psychic that I've talked to a couple of times, because a lot of times people feel guilty, when their pet passed, or did they do enough for them, or what did they feel? He says that when animals pass to the other side, humans cling to the material world. My mother, she had dementia, and she was she had lost a ton of weight. She couldn't eat anymore, but she struggled with every breath, but she lasted for a week just clinging, and then until she finally passed. But Rob Guttrow mentioned that animals pretty much accept it. They see the other side and they go to it because they have no fear of it, and they know it's going to be a better place, whereas humans tend to cling on to it. So animals have a whole different reaction to the transition, apparently, to the afterlife, if you believe that. And I think what you're probably researching too. So that would be fascinating. I mean, where do you think your research is going to go, or are you working with other people, or this kind of a personal endeavor that you're doing?
Yeah, I've already written a book on it, Animal Reactions to UFOs, but certainly the research is continuing, and I'm hoping, COVID put a stop to everything, but I'm hoping to work on a film and get scientists involved to talk about these different senses that animals have. And boy, would it be amazing to have an animal psychic to be able to communicate with an animal who's encountered a UFO. I would love to know their perspective, what it is they're sensing, because we can't really ask them, normal people at least.
Yeah, it's so strange. I don't know if Rob gets into the minds of animals when they're alive, but he really, when they pass, it was weird. It was a skill that he developed. And he's written a bunch of books, and he's comforted a lot of people because they, when they lose their pet, it's horrible, right?
Oh, me too. Yeah, love my dog.
He's been so amazing in terms of the episode. Like I mentioned, you were on Unsolved Mysteries. The episode I did was on connecting to your pet to the other side. He did a reading for one of my friends that lost a dog. My friend just sent him a picture. And then Rob said he talked about a little squeaker pig, that the squeaky toy didn't work anymore. And my friend Dan was like, she used to have a pig squeaky, but I don't know. And then he realized, right in his truck, there was a small little pig squeaky toy that he forgot he put there to remind him of his dog. And the squeaker no longer worked in it. So it was that was the most thing. And then he knew exactly, Rob talked about what the dog felt when it was passing. He knew exactly what part of the body, what was wrong with it. And he had some other things that were really interesting. He talked about at the end of life, afraid of water. The dog had fallen into the water when she was kind of losing her faculties a little bit. And that was the one time she was terrified. So yeah, he picked up on a bunch of stuff. So that was just, that was insane. But who knows, maybe you connect to him. And if there's a point of view he can provide, that would be kind of cool.
Yeah, we can speculate what they're sensing, feeling, but to get that special psychic knowledge of it would be incredible.
So, Linda, once this UFO disclosure comes out from the Pentagon in June, have you ever thought about going back to some of the people that you interviewed to get their thoughts about, now that it's almost built credibility, how that would impact them or affect them?
Yes, I have spoken to some of the people I had interviewed in the past, and universally the reaction is, oh, great, now it's becoming more accepted.
Yeah.
Where was all this legitimizing the topic when we were trying to tell our story?
Totally understand that. It's okay, a general or a pilot says it's real, but my opinion doesn't count.
Right.
I could totally get that.
Right.
Hudson Valley, you're still there. What's it like there now? What's it been like the past couple of years? Has the activity been around the same, less? What's it like?
It's picked up the last couple of years ago, the last few years. There was, it comes and goes, there's lulls, but what's mostly being seen now are large rectangles. That seems to have been around the last several years. Smaller triangular craft, what's just described as orbs of light. You don't see really any structure, just a big ball of light. And certainly last year, with so many people being home and not going anywhere, a lot more people were looking up at the sky. So activity certainly had an upswing last year.
What about abductions? Were there more abductions that you were aware of?
I haven't gotten a recent abduction report in I don't know how long. That seems to, unless people are not talking about it, which I don't know why they wouldn't, but that definitely diminished significantly.
I want to go into your paranormal side for the last part of this, but just two quick questions, if you don't mind. Today, Linda Zimmerman today, what are your thoughts about UFOs? How long do you think they've been here? Are they actively interacting among us? Are they watching from a distance? What do you think?
I think they are actually visitors from somewhere else that have been here probably thousands of years. And I think they have interacted with some people, whether it's just to study us or help us or keep an eye on us. Now, now that we have nuclear capabilities, maybe they're keeping a closer eye on us. So I think it's pretty normal, because as soon as we get the capability, we will start visiting other planets. It's not an outrageous thing to think that there are other civilizations across the universe who've maybe had 1,000,000 years ahead of us in technology. Look where we went from Kitty Hawk to walking on the moon.
Sure.
And so what will another 1,000,000 years do for us if we don't blow ourselves up?
Yeah.
I don't see that it's anything outrageous to believe that highly technical civilizations travel.
You mentioned the moon. A thought popped in my head. Do you think the moon is naturally made, or do you think it was made by an intelligent life form?
It's certainly unusual for the size of the moon versus the Earth, but the geology has told us that the moon was probably once part of the Earth and something hit it and it broke apart. So until we find a tunnel going down a staircase into the center of the moon, I'm going to believe it's naturally made.
That's fair. Got to tell you, we mentioned Luis Elizondo. There's a podcast called The Basement Office. I think it's from the New York Post. It's a podcast that they have. He was on that show, and he had mentioned a superior, before he left, a superior told him not to worry about these UFOs, or UAPs, they called them, unidentified aerial phenomena. And he said, why? Is it something we made? And he said, no, it's not ours. And then he said, well, what is it? And then his superior said, read your Bible. And he implied that it was demonic.
Wow.
Which was really weird. That was the only time I've listened to podcasts with Luis Elizondo where my stomach sank a little bit. I was like a little concerned. So when you hear something like that, what's your reaction?
I don't subscribe to the whole demonic thing. Why would a demon need a metal craft to land in a cornfield somewhere? Do demons really need a triangle the size of a football field? Yeah, I don't see how that comes about.
Yeah, it was very weird. It was actually hearing that. We'll see if that gets more play down the road. You're right. There just could be some bad intelligent beings, but they're not demons. They're just bad, right?
Right. Yeah, and I think who was it who wrote Chariots of the Gods?
Eric von Daniken.
Von Daniken. Okay. So in Chariots of the Gods, von Daniken was saying that the God I know doesn't need, a nuts and bolts craft to fly down to Earth. That goes along with this whole demonic thing. Why do we have to go to something supernatural, really, a spiritual demonic thing, when there are probably so many other beings on so many other planets who have developed technology and either had more of a head start or are better at it than we are?
God, do you think like aliens have ghosts? You think they have the same stuff that we have here?
Wow, there's a question.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I think part of the fascination, somebody had mentioned this years ago, why the UFOs are here, because this was this person's perspective. We have a unique physiology and nervous system, and we have this incredible ability to transcend, to reach higher levels of consciousness, and maybe they don't.
Yeah.
And they're fascinated by that. And I said, I like that idea. I'll go with that we have capabilities they don't have.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's very interesting. You are a ghost investigator, and you've spent part of your life doing that. You've had 2 UFO sightings. Have you ever had any personal ghost encounters?
Yes, those are unnerving. Seeing figures, of course, hearing things. We work with a psychic who has just gotten amazing information on cases. And I've been doing that for about 25 years. And to me, I have absolutely no doubt that ghosts are real. They are the spirits of departed people, usually who have regrets of some sort that keep them locked here in this plane, in this dimension, rather than moving on. And I always say death does not improve one's personality. It gets a little scary because some people were nasty in life and are nasty after death. And then there's, the sweet grandmothers who you still smell her cookies baking in the kitchen. You're lucky if you get that kind of ghost.
Yeah, New York is a great place for the paranormal. Have you ever been to the Shanley Hotel or to the Hinsdale House?
Oh, the Shanley, yeah. We were probably the first ones to do a real ghost hunt at the Shanley, and that was one of our earlier cases that I wrote about. Back at that time, before it was renovated and everything, that was a wildly haunted location.
Yeah, I spent one night there when I was actually, it wasn't the topic of my documentary, Afraid of Nothing, but I was actually interviewing someone who was a astronomer, and he lived up near there. And so we stayed the night there. It was kind of interesting. Is the Hudson Valley, does it have a kind of ghostly aura too, or is it more UFOs in that part of New York?
Oh boy, is it haunted. That's why I've written over 13 books, just most of them about Hudson Valley haunts. If the ingredients to a haunting are you need people, you need time, and you need traumatic events. And certainly we go back to the Dutch in the 1600s, Native Americans for thousands of years before that, Revolutionary War, conflict, murders, suicides, you name it. We have hundreds and hundreds of years of it here. It has to be per capita one of the most haunted locations in the country.
Is there a lot of clashing between Native Americans, Indians, and settlers in the Hudson Valley too? Were there any bloody wars there?
Oh, yes. There was always a massacre or two going on, usually the Native Americans getting massacred. But occasionally there were Indian raids as well. But certainly that all, again, goes back to the early 1600s. And between wars and disease, most of the Native Americans in this area were gone by the early 1800s.
Give us one or two of your favorite books that you wrote about your ghost hunting experience that you think people might want to check out.
Well, I have 13 volumes of The Ghost Investigator.
Wow.
But after the first 9, what I did was put together my favorite cases from the first 9 volumes. So that's probably a great one to start with. The compilation of volumes 1 through 9, my favorite cases, because I've had so many amazing adventures, and to put them all into one book. And actually what my plan is sometime in the next year is to combine all the books in one volume. I never intended to do that many volumes, but the cases just kept coming up. So I want to do a comprehensive book of my Hudson Valley UFOs and a comprehensive book of my Ghost Investigator. And then maybe I can semi-retire for real.
Yeah, it sounds like we're not going to let you retire in the short term, even though that's kind of a plan.
No.
Did you have a paranormal research team that you led, or did you just work with others in terms of to compile all these cases?
I predominantly would work alone in the beginning, and then I started working with police detective, an actual policeman, Mike Warden, who was just great. We've been doing haunted cases for decades together, and then we actually, at the Shanley Hotel, we met Barbara Roth, the psychic, who will join us on cases. Sometimes people don't feel comfortable having a psychic. They understand something strange is going on, but they don't quite want to go down that road. But when people, it's okay with them or they request it, we'll have Barbara. But that's it. We don't like these big groups. We like a small, quiet, controlled environment for our investigations.
Are you an empath or have any psychic abilities or?
Well, I think everybody has psychic abilities, and certainly when you do a couple of hundred investigations, you hone those abilities. So I'm not like Barbara, but I've had my moments on these investigations where things are so clear, or I see somebody or something, or get a piece of information that I can actually verify. So, the more you use it, I think the sharper it becomes.
And what's your favorite piece of ghost hunting equipment?
I think people are getting a little crazy with the instrumentation and the gadgets now. Honestly, I think the best thing to do is sit quietly with my digital recorder or a camcorder running and just pay attention to what's going on around you. No one ever calls us and says, oh, my EMF meter's been going off. No, they call and say, I heard footsteps, or I saw this, or I felt that. So I have actually stepped back from a lot of the equipment and prefer to experience it rather than run 40 miles of cable and all of these
body cam.
Some of the equipment is just crazy now. I just laugh at it. And I think the whole ghost hunting world needs to take a reality check.
All right. Well put. Your last question, where can we go to buy your books and follow what you're working on? I know you're trying to slow down, but it seems like you still have a lot of great stuff out there. So where can we go to follow all things Linda Zimmerman and also watch your documentary, In the Night?
In the Night Sky, yes.
The Night Sky, yes, sorry.
All of my books are on Amazon, and many of them are also in ebook formats. I have, a dozen Facebook pages. If you go to GoToZim, GOTOZIM, it will have links to all the different things I do. With everything going on, I don't update my website as often as I would like, but I very regularly update my Facebook pages. So if you find the Linda Zimmerman Facebook page, the Hudson Valley UFOs Facebook page, you can see what I'm up to.
Are there any TV shows on the Travel Channel we can look for you in the fall coming up, or can you disclose that?
I have 2 shows that will be, one is coming out for a second season this year. I don't know exactly when. And then there's a brand new show I just filmed about 6 episodes for, which you know how this goes. I can't say when that will be out. And I'm filming 1 episode of a totally different show next week. So yeah, go to the Travel Channel, Discovery. I'm usually on there in some rerun late at night.
Yeah. Discovery Plus, right? And I think just to remind people, you were just on a great episode called Something in the Sky on Unsolved Mysteries. There is a podcast for Unsolved Mysteries. You can find many places. I listen to it on Spotify, so you have a great episode there. So, Linda, thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, can I just mention one more thing? I do have a UFO podcast. It's called UFO Headquarters, and that's on Hudson River Radio or Spreaker or Stitcher or Apple, all of that. So if people want to hear my UFO podcast, please check that out.
What's the format? What do you do on your show? Do you interview people? Is it your perspective, or what's the kind of format of it?
It's both. A lot of the times I just cover a particular topic. A lot of Hudson Valley material, obviously, but we've had Kathy Martin and Stan Gordon, and not only just researchers. I will get an experiencer or someone who just had an interesting sighting to get them on the show. Because I think a lot of these shows, they're always looking for the big names. I like to interview people who've had sightings, had experiences, hear their side of the story.
That's great. Well, thank you so much. It's been a timely and entertaining episode. I appreciate your time, Linda.
Thank you very much.
You've been listening to the Afraid of Nothing podcast. Please subscribe and like us on Facebook. Until next time, stay scared.
Hey, you're still here? Great. Then why not listen to another episode? Visit afraidofnothingpodcast.com to peruse all the shows. That's afraidofnothingpodcast.com. And while you're there, click the coffee cup icon to buy me a coffee and leave a review. I'll give you a shout-out in an upcoming episode, and the world will know how swell you are.